Hello, 778 candidates. This is Cassie Bailey, and I am presenting Haiku: A Year of Seasons by John J. Muth. Haiku is actually a poetry book, and actually for both my children and young adult books, I will be presenting poetry books. This one also doubles, however, as a picture book. Haiku is actually the name of the panda, and it is a play on words for the poetry form of haiku. In the beginning of the book, the author leaves a note, and in it he explains that haiku is typically made up of 17 sound parts in Japanese, and those sound parts are pronounced on, and usually divided into 3 different lines. What John Muth states is that he's not going to stick to that 17 sound parts bit because oftentimes the translation from Japanese to English does not always work out. So, and our syllables aren't the same as Japanese syllables, so he doesn't stay within the confines of the 17 sound parts, but instead moves outside of that. And his rationale for doing so is that the essence of haiku is that it is both sensory and about emotion and feeling and about celebrating nature. And he brings that to his book, Haiku: A Year of Seasons. The age that it is appropriate for is grades pre-K through 3rd. It's really best probably as a read aloud for primary classrooms. However, it could also be used in the older grade levels, and I will discuss that later. The readability is a level M, so obviously that would have to be adult directed in the younger grades. Essentially, as you notice, the title is a play on words, haiku meaning haiku. As I stated already, Ku is the panda and main character of the story, and he is, in this book, exploring the world around him during the 4 seasons, starting with fall. Early on in the book, 2 friends actually join in on the seasonal fun, and they play with Ku throughout the book. I wanted to touch on the quality of this book because Short, Lynch, Brown, and Tomlinson have criteria for children's literature in regards to poetry. This book is both original and imaginative, and it helps students or children perceive ordinary things in new ways, to be able to kind of see and take in the world around them. It has definitely rich vocabulary, and the words that Muth uses definitely create the visuals, and the art really helps pop it into life. The illustrations are very impressionistic in nature because of the use of white space and my text got cut off there. I apologize for that. And light to kind of highlight the things around the illustration. As I stated earlier, due to the translation, this does break from the rules of the form, however, of the original poetry form. However, like Muth states, he did that purposefully and explains his rationale for doing so. Short, Lynch, Brown, Tomlinson, the authors of the children's literature book that we use in the class, does state that poetry studies reveal a dislike of haiku, but I think this could be a really cute exception to the rule. So I think this is one that you could definitely introduce to young students to this particular type of poetry. And I've got some excerpts there on the left side for you to read. As far as a link to Pillars of Reading, definitely there are several. In phonics, there's a little added bonus that the author talks about in the note at the beginning of the book as well, that he has created what he calls an alphabetical path, where students can find and seek the letters in order. They are capitalized, A through Z, and discuss what words begin with each letter, so that might be a little fun phonics activity for the students. Definitely poetry, lots of different forms could be used to enhance or have students practice fluency, including repeated readings or echo reading of the stanzas. Vocabulary, there is so much rich vocabulary in this book and so much visual imagery that comes to life through the words, and I really think that students could take some time and take a look at how the author used adjectives to describe things, and also could take some of the words that are used and find synonyms for those words, or find words that the author used as a synonym for simpler words. As far as comprehension goes, the author used lots of different types of figurative language, so that could definitely be a discussion, as well as older students maybe take a look at this book. As I stated at the very beginning, it is best as a read aloud for primary grades, but could be used as a mentor text for older students to discuss the poetry form, as well as figurative language. Particularly, there's a lot of use of onomatopoeia and personification. Interdisciplinary-wise, obviously for the younger students, you could talk about the different seasons and the changing of the seasons in science. Math, you could discuss the calendar of the year and discuss what months fall within those seasons and what things are occurring during those seasons. For older students who might use this book as a mentor book, you could have a debate on whether or not Muth should have broke the rule of the 17 sound parts in haiku form. And I think that could actually be a real fun discussion piece in the classroom, because poetry in and of itself is almost like a rebel. And so you could talk about how poetry can bring out some controversy there. Figurative language, obviously I've already touched on that and how students can use that as a way to identify and then emulate things like personification or onomatopoeia. And you could definitely also tie it and link it to history to have a discussion of the history and origination of haiku poetry in Japan. As far as diverse literature goes, haiku is diverse literature, so that helps right out the gate. You could conduct a small study of haiku, especially again with the older students, discussing authentic pieces and sharing authentic pieces that are translated into English, and discussing authors who wrote it. So maybe even conducting a little haiku author study. The setting of the book is Asia. I'm not going to say it's necessarily Japan, but you could kind of tell that it is Asian in nature. It's mostly based on the illustration, and the types of vegetation like Japanese cherry blossoms are included in the story. There's also cultural references in the book. Writing opportunities, students could create their own book of seasonal poetry, observational poetry using sensory words. They can write their own haikus about nature, or even collect vocabulary as they're going through the book itself. I really like the idea personally. Out of those that I created was the observational poetry using sensory words. Students can observe give them some time and let them observe anything in nature and try to come up with different sensory words and maybe stringing a story together or a poem together about what they've observed. So that is the end of haiku. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope that you pick up the book soon. Have a nice evening.